Oh, I am.
Scotch maybe.
Scotch?
Rye whiskey, sure.
Yeah.
Canadian whiskey better. Get it for me.
Canada Dry?
What's that?
Canada Dry?
Yeah.
We're talking whiskey,
I'm,
not fizz.
oh, okay. IPAs, I could get in that conversation, not whiskey.
Okay. Well, hello.
Well, hey, the lake is up though.
Oh, it's up nice.
It's about where it should be.
It should be like that all year. Hi. Good, how are
Conemaugh
you?
Lake is a half inch from going no way.
I bet we got close to a foot of water. Yeah.
Well, I checked it last night, and from where we were before it started to last night, it was at least 6 inches. Probably it's pushed
Oh,
up.
we're way over
Pushed up
6
8.
inches.
And then I haven't checked it yet today. I haven't been home yet.
Well,
today.
Brookfield got over 8 inches of rain.
Yeah.
They got closer to 10,
And-
11.
And the runoff.
Into
Since I
the,
left this morning to when I got the kids off the bus and came back here, there's still rivers running alongside each side of Glen Cove Road.
oh, yeah,
So,
yeah.
What do you see like from property I got? Hello. Parker's
I know. He's just gonna be late. Yeah. You wanna get the mic going? Oh, we're on? So you, okay. That's great. Let me get this done. It's Marvin. Yeah. I'm not gonna answer it. I want this meeting over. All right, good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Town of Delafield Board of Supervisors Budget Workshop for Tuesday, September 13th. If you would do a roll call, Mr. Green?
Supervisor Miller,
Present.
Kranick,
Present.
Wolfley,
present.
Chairman Troy.
Present.
Thank you.
Let the record reflect that I believe Stephen Michaels called and said he'll be a few minutes late, but will be joining us. Discussion on the 2023 proposed budget. Mr. Green, I think we're going to start with our fire chief, or?
Yeah, so I thought we would just start with Matt's presentation, and then if there's time after, we can go into just general budget discussion. So, Matt,
Okay.
I'll give the floor to you.
Keeping, we saw a large part of this a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah, I
Great.
will try to keep it as brief as possible, but get you the content. There's really an important part that I want everyone to see, and that's the incident that happened on July 16th, because I think it really puts this into perspective on what we're talking about. So, to belabor it, so the long-range staffing group's been meeting since April. Anthony Arbusius from the town has been representing the fire board, along with Jeff Rumler, Village Oconomowoc Lake, Jim Morris, retired fire chief of Wales, Genesee, myself, and Chief Heltemus. I'm sorry, I pulled the wrong presentation. It shows you how this date is. Let's get you the right one. So when we talk about expectations in emergency medical services, we really look at the American Heart Association as our guiding light. The American Heart Association recommends a response time of 8 minutes or less when we're responding to any sort of medical emergency, especially those of people that are not breathing, they're having a stroke, they're having a seizure, any type of brain injury, or they're choking. And that 8-minute response time or less provides that citizen or our customer with the best chance of survival from an incident as serious as that. And every minute you go out past that 8-minute response time, they can draw an exponential decrease in patient outcomes from those anoxic brain injuries, from your heart not beating for that period of time, from the stroke continuing to deprive your brain of oxygen, to patient outcomes. And those outcomes can be as far as the patient's deceased and or live in a constant vegetative state for the remainder of their life. So when we look at AHA and we look for guidelines as to what we should be performing at as an agency, we really hone in on that 8-minute response time. And that's an industry standard response time that we shoot for.
Industry standard nationwide?
Pretty much so, yes. American Heart Guideline. You know, obviously, in communities like these, where you have a rural setting, it's an attainable thing. Last year, we were at 8 minutes and 4 seconds department-wide for our response time, 90th percentile. You get up in really rural communities up north in your Bessemer, Michigan's, obviously, that's not an attainable number, but we did hit that number last year. And when we're talking about fire responses, we look at the National Fire Protection Association, and again, they provide us with that guiding light. The NFPA recommendation, again, is 8 minutes or less to a structure fire in a 2,000 square foot home, 2,000 or less square foot home. And they recommend that 15 firefighters be on scene of that incident in 8 minutes or less. I think it's really important for the sake of this presentation to say that we're not asking for that 8-minute response time for all 15 people to be on scene with that, within that 8 minutes. We're merely asking to get that first heavy piece of apparatus there, the first fire engine there to help mitigate this incident. And again, that provides you with the best chance of survival if you're trapped in that building and you're going to be come by the toxic heat and gases that a fire produces. Or if you're handicapped and you're just simply unable to rescue yourself out of that building. We know that, we have garden-style apartments. Oakton Manor is probably the best one to state in the town of Delafield here. That NFPA recommends 27 firefighters on the scene of that in an open-air strip mall, such as the commercial structures that we have in the city of Delafield. NFPA recommends 27 individuals. That is and will forever probably be in this area of mutual aid response, where we're relying on our partners from Pewaukee, Western Lakes, Heartland to come in and assist with all of those type of incidents. But as this staffing crisis progresses, we are not the only ones in this situation. The Heartland Fire Department, all of the agencies that rely on part-time and paid-on-call individuals are struggling in this manner, one way or another. So the reliance on mutual aid is becoming less and less, and it's becoming less and less reliable. So we need to take care of this on our own. And it really comes to light in a structure fire that we had. This is on July 16th. Please disregard the date in the upper corner here. We had just gotten these cameras installed, and they were not, we didn't figure out how to change the date on them because they were set in Julian time. But this is a structure fire we had on July 16th of this year. It was about 6:20 at night, and the fire comes in as a fire that starts outside of a structure by a lawnmower that was placed into a plastic shed after the gentleman had just got done mowing his lawn. He goes inside on a Saturday evening, cooks himself some dinner, and the neighbors next door that are at a graduation party notice that his shed's on fire, and they go bang on the door. They try to get his attention. He goes outside. He tries to get a garden hose to extinguish this fire, and is ultimately unsuccessful. But I think it's really important to say that this fire was notified and noticed immediately. So we had no delay in response time. You'll see response time notification delays in the middle of the night. If the house is in the middle of a field and no one is in it, it takes a while to get notified, but this was a zero delay. So
this is Maple Avenue.
Yep, he's heading down Maple Avenue.
And
He left right
left right
from up
here.
there. Yep, yes,
Okay.
sir. So he is responding from the Maple Avenue station. This, to put it into perspective for you, where he is going to is off of Sunset Drive in the town of Genesee. And I'm going to fast forward a little bit out of the sake of everyone's time so we don't have to watch the full thing here. But this is our third call for service at the time. So we talk a lot about calls for service, and when they're on one call, we're on 2 calls, and we're possibly on 3 calls. And 62% of the time, when we're on 1 call, we're on 2 calls. This was a short staffing day. Again, this is our third call for service. And
Is this 18?
this is Highway 83.
He's going past the station, that should have
Oh,
responded.
yeah, yeah.
Yes, and that,
Okay.
and Ed, you're exactly correct. This is what we're talking about. He drives past the fire station in Wales, the Wales Genesee station. The lights are on and no one's home. That particular day, staffing-wise, there were only 2 people assigned to that station. They were out on an EMS call and they were just clearing Waukesha Memorial Hospital. So you'll see, so he passed that station at the 6-minute mark in his response. He gets on scene of this fire at the basically 10.5-minute mark, where there should have been an engine on scene for about 4 minutes prior to his arrival. And the engine that actually responds out of this station should have been the second due engine. They should be simply stretching a secondary line and going in the backside of this structure and pushing it out from the front. But that's not what happened on this day. And this day is the reality of what we are facing, all kind of put up in a video here. And again, I'm trying to fast forward this out of the sake of,
Well, it's just a confusion.
yep,
But he started on Maple Avenue, and he went to 83?
correct.
Why didn't he do the frontage road to 83 and not Maple Avenue?
Front, I guess I don't quite understand your
He-
question.
He left here, right here, and he turned left, and he meandered all through Maple over to Highway 83 versus going right, going up past Home Depot, going to 83, much faster route.
I haven't done the calculation on distance and things of that nature. I can tell you that the general route that we take, if we're going, what is south of here, and the general route that the crews take is down Maple, because it does kind of kick you out halfway. They get stuck down at that intersection of 83 and Hillside very often, and that is a very dangerous intersection for them to navigate, especially during peak times. There is no EVP on the 83 and Hillside intersection facing, if they're going
All right.
to the west.
That's right, I know, one
Yep.
distraction, go ahead.
So, that is generally the route that they take. So, in just a second here, you'll be able to see the column of smoke where he's heading to, actually, no, you can't, because he's gonna turn right. So he rolls up on this scene, and again, we should have had an engine crew on scene of this about 4 minutes prior to Steve's arrival. I think the calculation of when he drove past was about 4 minutes prior to this, him arriving on scene, so maybe give it, 3 minutes or so with the fire engine, because it travels slower. But he pulls up, you can see all the cars in the other lot for that graduation party, and this is what he arrives on. All right, and this is a fire now that's been burning for all practical purposes for about 10 minutes. So when we talk about a fire doubling in size every 30 seconds, watch this fire, because over the next 30 seconds and minute and a half, this fire quadruples in size. Not only does it quadruple in size, but the fire breaches from the garage, which has a firewall in it, to the interior of the structure, and fills that interior of that structure with toxic heat, gases, smoke, things that are incompatible with life. And you could just see the way that this is taking off. Steve's job at this fire is to be the supervisor. And it's unfortunate that the sound isn't working right now, because his life and what he's doing and making sure that he's got the appropriate resources to get on scene and to mitigate this hazard are his top priority at this moment. So he's working on that. There's another chief that's gonna come in, it's Chief Hoppy, but he's working for Pewaukee that day, so he comes in and handles the operations aspect of it, which you'll see him in the front yard doing in just a minute here. But again, it's heart-wrenching to watch what's going on here and know that if anyone's inside this house right now, you can see the smoke coming out of all of the eaves of the house. If you watch the 2 eaves, it's a tri-level home. If anyone's inside of there and they can't get themselves out, they are going to succumb to that toxic heat and gases. COs in the millions of, parts per million, and everything else is with it. So the engine arrives on scene. We're now roughly 12 minutes into this incident. We have a standard in our organization that from the time that the parking brake hits on the engine, we want water on the fire within 2 minutes. It happens in 1:54 here. As you're watching it, it takes a painfully long time. But that crew is busy. They're grabbing the tools that they need to do. They're making sure that their air packs are on. They're making sure that all their gear is set and ready to go so that they're protected from this fire. Not only that, they're running shorthanded because we were shorthanded this day staffing wise, where it's 3 people on the engine company. Normally there would be 3 people on the engine company that is chased up by a person on the ambulance. That other person on the ambulance isn't here that day. So they have to do it a little bit shorthanded. So ideally there's 3 people that advance this hose line to this garage and put this fire out, but they're only working with 2 this day. The third person that's on the engine is the driver operator. He's got to not only make sure that the water is leaving the pump, but he's also making sure that he is supplied with water once he runs out. This is a rural water setting for us, so we have no hydrants in this, much like in areas of the town of Delafield where there are no hydrants in the town of Delafield at all. We have to do this. There's Chief Hoppy arriving on scene. They run out of water 3 times during this incident, 3 times. So if we run out of water, and there's a crew inside of that structure, they're pulling out for their own safety. So if they're trying to search the structure and they run out of water, they're coming out, because if we can sit without water for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and just watch how this thing is just taken off from where it's at.
So you have 3 tenders that bring the water then when you ran out, or?
Yep, we do. There's the tender upstairs. There's the tender. The first arriving tender to this incident actually came from the village of Waukesha, and they arrived 23 minutes after the initial dispatch. So it's kind of putting the mutual aid response into perspective. The village of Waukesha is the closest mutual aid department to this incident, but they too struggle with staffing, and it's something.
What was the first vehicle on site?
The first vehicle on site is this Tahoe that's in, and then the engine that you see parked behind the Peterbilt tractor.
Yeah, but the first vehicle on site is the hood we're looking at on the bottom of the screen. Okay.
That's correct. You can see they have water on the fire now. Watch 2 things. Watch how the smoke converts over to gray smoke. So gray smoke is what we're looking to see. That's a conversion, not black smoke where it's continuing to build. And the other thing, just watch how this thing shrinks in size. They've got water on the fire now for about 30 seconds, and you can see it exponentially decreasing in size. And again, this is the point where this engine should have been the backup crew. This fire should have been knocked down by the time that this engine arrived on scene. They should be stretching a hand line off the one of the pre-connects off the truck and going in the back side of this house and pushing it back through the garage. And also searching the house for any victims, any occupants, and assisting in rescue. But again, they operate on this scene for really 9 minutes before there's any sort of additional fire apparatus on the scene. This puts them at danger, this puts the citizens at danger, and it really kind of puts into the presentation the realistic ability that we have when we run short-staffed. Again, for sake of time and everyone's time here, I'm not going to let this play that out. You'll see the Wales Genesee engine arrives here in just a minute, and they are the backup water source. So their primary focus is to get the LDH connected, which is the hose laying in the roadway. So they pump the engine with their 1,000 gallons of water to give them water. So they're still in the process of knocking this down at the moment. And then they have to give them water, otherwise that engine's going to run out. So they're using a 2.5 inch hand line right now. This hand line flows 250 gallons of water per minute, full tilt. So you can imagine 1,000 gallons of water. They've got roughly 4 minutes of work to do before they run out of water. And I'm sorry, they were already on scene. I didn't see them roll up there, so I fast forwarded through it. As we get towards the end of this though, just note in your head, I'll keep going again out of the sake of everyone's time. The closest ambulance that arrives, or the first ambulance that arrives on scene of this, arrives at the 18-minute mark. It's from Vernon. And again, that's an automatic mutual aid. We have all of our response plans dialed in. Chief Hoppy is an amazing response planner. He understands the dispatch system and its capabilities probably better than anyone else in the county. So all of our response plans are pre-planned and pre-rigged and pre-programmed. Okay, so A lot of time spent at the dispatch center when we were launching Lake Country Fire Rescue to make sure that all this was happening by GPS location, and the closest, most appropriate agencies were being called to these incidents right out of the gate. Okay, so we use, like we said, the village of Waukesha. They arrive at the 22-minute mark. The ambulance comes from the town of Vernon, or I think it's the village of Vernon now, but it comes from Vernon. It arrives at the 18-minute mark. So that at that 18-minute mark, had one of our firefighters been injured, that would have been their first ambulance crew that would have taken care of them. And then not only that, but had there been an occupant injured, smoke inhalation, burns type, anything like that, 18 minutes is what it took to get that ambulance on scene. And furthermore, the next mutual aid or the first mutual aid engine on the scene of this incident arrives at the 21-minute mark, and it's the village or city of Pewaukee Fire Department. So
Where's our ambulances?
they're out on calls.
Okay, so they're out on call.
Because it's the third call of the day that they're dealing with at the time.
Yeah.
They're simultaneous calls, right?
Yeah,
Third
it's not-
simultaneous.
Because if you remember back when we drove up Maple Avenue, you saw the sheriff's
Yeah,
cars.
yeah, I mean, third call of the day and and simultaneous call is different.
Simultaneously, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. How often does that happen?
Um,
Whatever I ask, I'm gonna want backup statistics and numbers and
Absolutely.
instances. Okay.
62% of the time when we're out on one call, we're out on two calls. I don't have the third and fourth. We gave them to the board. Steve and Matt asked for those type of statistics. We gave them to the board a while back, actually not a while back, I think at a meeting or two ago, where we talked about that. So it's, I can get you the meeting minutes, so you have all the same.
But this is a rarity, having multiple calls where every one of our facilities are taken.
No. It's not.
I mean, 62% for two is better than
Well,
half.
Which tells you,
Right. Yeah.
well, which tells you that the most is the inverse of that. 38%.
I mean, it's, I used yesterday as the storm example that came through, right? We had the storm, the severe amounts of rain, between midnight on Monday morning and 6 a.m. We ran 12 calls for service. 3 of those were for medical calls. One of those medical calls was, we were required, we called the city of Waukesha over to help on, so. It's not a daily occurrence that we're relying on mutual aid, and let's be very frank and clear that mutual aid is a reciprocal agreement. So if we respond to Heartland for a structure fire, they're gonna come back and help us if it's one of the zones that they're closer to. And all of that is an arrangement and a relationship that is reciprocal. There isn't one agency that's over reliance on the other one. It's just how we've always operated as agencies. So, again, I'm going to continue on here for the sake of your time. But really, I mean, for all practical purposes, we are one of the most basic forms of government. And when a citizen and your constituents and our customers call 911, they have an expectation when they call 911. And I can tell you from the survey that we do, the pre-survey that's done in this presentation, is that expectation is generally in that 8 minutes or less mark, right? They expect an ambulance to be on scene when their loved one is not breathing in 8 minutes or less. And I think the statistics on that are 80% of the respondents. That's what they expect. They also expect that when their house is on fire, that there are 2 engines, an ambulance, a ladder company, and a water tender on scene of that fire in generally that 8-minute mark, okay? So we know as an agency last year we hit that. We were at the 8-minute and 4 mark, 8 minutes, 4 seconds for our statistical response times for 2021. And that's the 90th percentile reporting. That is the industry standard on how we report. We don't report on averages because averages only tell you what I can do 50% of the time. So last year we were at 8 minutes and 4 seconds. We reported earlier in this year and gave the town board a report on our response times and how we decreased that by 40% over 2020. So Lake Country Fire response times to the town of Delafield as a whole decreased by 40% over 2020. We were at the 8:04 mark. This year we're at 10 minutes and 23 seconds. That's a 53%, or I'm sorry, I got it later on, yeah, 58% increase in response times. 28, I'm sorry.
28%.
28%, my bad, over last year. So, I mean, we know that this is where we're heading. We know that fire department staffing has been discussed for decades. There's newspaper clippings, there's all sorts of discussions on this topic. And the fact of the matter is that we've relied on low and free cost labor for almost a century. And that's changing, and it's changing faster than I think anyone wants it to change. And I think it's changing as society and as we've seen the whole labor market in this country change over the last 2 years. We also know that our minimum staffing is guided by national response standards. So what we're looking to do here really has not changed. The number of people on duty has not changed since we first put the consolidation together in 2020 and 2021. When Chief Moon, Chief Kozlowski, and myself sat down, we asked and we had a plan together for 12 individuals to be on shift 24/7, 365. This is our operational staffing as it sits today, and you'll see what I'll call the boxes in orange that are highlighted on the top. Those are full-time paid positions. Okay, so those are our full-time members of our organization, and the bottoms are the boxes in the purple and the yellow on the bottom of this diagram. In this section right here are all of our what I'll call that low and free cost labor. So those are our part-time individuals, those are the paid on-call individuals, and those are our interns. And last year, the intern program was dealt a deathly blow by the Department of Labor, where the thousands of intern programs that exist in fire departments across this country were all dealt the same blow. And the Department of Labor said, basically, the way that you're utilizing these employees, because they're young, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, they're just out of high school, they want to be a firefighter. We use them as an intern in the beginning, and on the second day or third day, if they wanted to work and come make some extra money, we would pay them as part-time people to go work standby events, to fill in on a shift here or fill in on a shift there. The Department of Labor said, you can't do that anymore. They are employees, you're utilizing them as employees, and therefore they are subject to minimum wage laws. So that's problem one. That's been a significant blow to that system. And the second problem is just a paradigm shift of how fire departments across really our area in southeast Wisconsin are change their hiring practices. So I'm going to use the Waukesha's, the Brookfields, the Milwaukee suburbs and North Shores of this discussion. That last year when they were hiring, and the previous years when they would hire firefighter paramedics pretty much exclusively with 60 college credits. Okay, so we hire our part-time individuals as firefighter EMTs. They come into our organization. Really, if they're a career seeker, they come in right out of high school through one of our programs. I mean, we have multiple programs to get these people into our organization and show them how great of a job the fire service is, and we train them up. So we get them through Firefighter 1, we get them through EMT, they join our organization, they'll either work part-time or in the intern capacity as an employee with our organization for a number of years, and generally about 1.5 years after they join our organization, they go and take the paramedic program. Paramedic takes 1.5 years from start to finish, and then we keep them for about another year before they're hired on full-time by any sort of agency. And really what happens during this is that we train them, and either if we have a full-time vacancy that we can fill them with, we bring them into our organization, but then they'll go off and get hired. And we used to keep them for an average of 5 to 6 years before they would get hired, and that has gone down to 2 years, and it will go less next year as we run the statistics. And the change and the paradigm shift that's happened is that those agencies that I mentioned that would only hire firefighter paramedics, on January 1st of this year, the first agency switched and they started hiring firefighter EMT basics. So the same person that I'm fighting for as an organization to come and work part-time with us so I can train you and I can teach you how to be an amazing firefighter so you'll get a job one day, that same person is now eligible to be hired at the Brookfields, Waukesha's, and Milwaukee Burbs to be making anywhere from $60,000 to $80,000 a year with health insurance and full benefits. it's no wonder where they're going. They're going to, they're young kids, they're seeking full-time jobs, and they're heading in that direction. Right now, statistically, our organization, we have 20 part-time individuals. Out of those 20 part-time individuals that work, I'll call it on a regular basis, those 20 individuals, 18 of those 20 are seeking jobs in the fire service. So we can say with relative certainty that next year this problem will get worse if we don't start doing something about it now. Again, we're losing staff at a 5-to-1 ratio, an 80% burn rate. That is the industry standard because, again, our people come to us as part-time individuals. They want a job in the fire service, and we're losing them to career agencies. We're not losing them to other part-time agencies. We lose them to career agencies.
Oh, can we get to the budget itself? Okay.
Absolutely. We'll be there in just a second. So what's the effects? What does this have, right? So in the month of July, the city of Delafield Station was browned out or closed 13 out of the 31 days. In the month of August, the city of Delafield Station was closed 12 out of 31 days because we just don't have the bodies to put in those 12 positions every day. We're mandating full-time staff to come back and work part-time positions, paying them time and a half to get to our 8 people so we keep 2 stations online. So again, we hit it, I hit it earlier in the presentation, but 28% response time increase from 2021 versus 2022. So we talk about what are the current constraints and what are the limits. So this is what the levy limit and the CPI-2 really does for us. On a $2 million budget, our allowed credit in a 5% increase is $110,000. You add a 7% health insurance and retirement increase into it, fuel increase, a 2% cost of living. It gives you $15,000 to hire a full-time employee. Average cost of a full-time employee, full benefits, health insurance, retirement, FICA, workman's comp, all calculated in is $124,000, which it takes you 8 years to hire one full-time employee, assuming no other increases. To do what we need to do, it would take us over 200 years to get there using this model.
I have a question. Your allowed credit CPI plus 2%, you're saying it's 5%?
I'm using, for transparency, I'm using a 5% increase. This year is an anomaly. This year is, we're calculating it at 7.5%. And that's the number we get from the Department of Revenue.
So this is not your budget?
No, I'm giving you an example of what the CPI-2 actually does for us. So what's the need, right? So in July, we approached the board with the need, and this is the need that the staffing group came up with in the course of their workings over the months of April, May, and June. And really the need is to hire 22 additional headcount over really what was brought up first when we thought the only way you could do this was go to referendum, was to do it all in one fell swoop. And again, that's the recommendation of the staffing group. But over the course of our budget meetings and over the course of the presentation, on July 12th, we were asked to come up with some sort of phase-in plan because the board felt that that number wasn't achievable. And we certainly, if we got the funding approved, we couldn't hire all those headcount in 1 year. We know that. So we came up with a phase-in plan, all right? And we came up with a phase-in plan that would add 7 staff in 2023, 6 in 24, plus a mechanic to take care of the fleet. One thing that we're really struggling with is repairs of vehicles, because just as we're struggling with staffing, repair services are struggling with staffing. It's taking 2 and 3 weeks to get frontline equipment back on the road, and we don't have the backup type equipment to keep doing that. And again, 6 staff in 2025 and to fill out with 3 staff in 2026. So what does that look like? What does it look like next year? And you'll slowly see, and in the presentation and in the executive summary that you have, slowly we convert those yellow box, or the blue and yellow boxes over to the orange boxes, which are filled with full-time individuals, okay? So here's the nuts and bolts. What does this cost? So this year, the board passed 2 budgets, the first one being a CPI plus 2 budget that was needed according to the agreement. And the second one is a needs-based budget that was unanimously approved by the board. So the
I'll
need,
be clear though, the fire board did not make any value judgment in its motion to approve these 2 things. We passed 2 budgets with no caveat language as to which one was preferred, so,
I mean, I,
Passed both budgets.
2 budgets.
Okay.
both budgets unanimously approved by the board. And the, you know, so The next year, the ask over the CPI two is an additional 923,000. And then the estimates out in the out years are down below there. So how do we fund it, right? So, you know, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to this.
Also, to be clear, the board rendered no judgment onto the out years of this. Only 2023 was discussed.
Correct, that's exactly, and really what I'm focusing on and what we're focusing on as an agency is getting us to 2023, so we can stop browning out fire stations and we can continue responding to our constituents. That's it in a nutshell. But there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to this. There are some communities that are talking about doing things in a number of different manners next year, and I think the overwhelming support for this to take a step next year to stop doing what we're doing is it's overwhelming right now at that level because I think everyone agrees that we got to stop closing the fire station. But there's not a one-size-fits-all approach at that. This is ultimately what your body is tasked with is coming up to a solution that our constituents can stand up to and understand. So we need to find an immediate solution for 2023 coupled with some sort of long-term solution. Dan and I just sat through a fire fee approach. I can tell you that the Western Lakes cadres, the Western Lakes individuals are also talking about doing something very similar to this. And this could be a gap bridge where we bridge a gap for next year in doing some sort of fire fee approach to it. And you can do that fire fee where you, there's all sorts of different mechanisms that take place in there. One of the things that's not very popular is you could just exceed your levy limit. I'm not advising you to do that. It's just an option that's out there. And the third option is a referendum. When we talk about the referendum is a 20-month time frame. Okay, so if we were to go to referendum in April of 2023, this would not be able to launch really until January of 2024, and it doesn't do anything for 2023. And that's why we're focused on coming up with a solution for 2023, making sure that those needs are met while, as to Steve's point, that we talk about, address, and agree upon a plan for the out years of it.
So what's your budget problem in 2023?
Budget problem is that,
Based on the 5+2, I mean CPI +2.
$923,000.
yep,
100,
$923,000.
No,
no, that's not.
That's adding 7 firefighters.
Yep.
What's your budget problem?
we don't have a budget problem. I mean, if you want to do a CPI +2 based budget, that is in the agreement, and that budget represents a $2.7 million spend with the communities, and that was sent over to Dan
A couple of weeks ago.
a couple of weeks ago. Correct.
Yeah.
But that, again, that doesn't meet the needs.
He's still going to be browning out stations, and the response times are going to continue to trend the wrong way.
So, I mean, it doesn't meet the needs of the organization. I can tell you that flat out. So, you know, again, going back to what do we do as an organization? What makes us different? I mean, we do everything we can as an organization. We do interfacility transports; those generate millions of dollars for our residents and income. We're one of 2 non-tech training centers in the state, so that both provides a revenue source for us, and not only that, secondary to that, it provides a personnel pipeline to the organization. So we're in the Kettle Moraine High School, we're in Arrowhead High School, we're working with those students there in their freshman year of high school to introduce them to the fire service, and we get them in, we teach them life at the firehouse. We are doing all sorts of programs up to doing EMT, which provides for not only their education, but then they can come work with us. We have a reputation as a destination, so that people want to come work for us for the same reason that we all live in these communities. They're amazing communities to live in, they're amazing communities to work in, raise children in, send them to school. But that's becoming less impactful now that we have low staffing numbers and the crews are being put in situations that they shouldn't be. Our current budget is a 60-40 split, so 60% from municipal fees, 40% from fees for service like fire inspections, 2% dues, things like that. When you compare us to our average, compare us to other departments that are like size and meeting the needs, we are 39 cents per thousand of assessed value of our customers. The departments that are meeting the needs of their residents, and I'll say that in terms of response times and staffing, are $1.32. So all of this has been put onto a page on our website, lakecountryfire.com/staffing, where you can see this presentation. You can see the executive summary document and any of the supporting documentation that goes along with it, where it's out there and it's available to not only yourself but the public to read, digest, ask questions. Feel free to ask me any questions. I'm certainly happy to answer them.
Do we have a printed copy of his proposed budget?
Did you bring your, I can print them for you.
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't bring them?
No, I mean, they were sent over to Dan. I wasn't sure what he put in the packet.
How are you running year-to-date?
How are we?
2020? What's your budget performance 2022 year-to-date?
Generally, we track, I mean, I think at the last board meeting, Steve, we were 58% through the year, and we were right around 58% on expense-wise. Revenue-wise, we were tracking over.
So you're above budget year-to-date on revenue, and you're about where you should be on expenses?
Correct, sir.
Okay. How many employees have you lost this year?
I don't have that statistic in front of me. I can tell you from 2020 through July of this year, we had lost 49 employees and hired 19.
Okay. It's confusing to me. You've lost 49 employees, you've hired 19. So let's just say it's 50 versus 20. You're
Down 30.
down 30. Why aren't your expenses down? Why aren't your expenses down? Well, why isn't the decrease in employees reflected in expenses? Because there are only 10 interns, right?
We're down to 6 interns now because we have to pay for them. But the real simple answer to that is what happened last weekend. I had to mandate 3 full-time employees to work overtime to make it so I had 2 fire stations open in the 79 square miles that we cover. Those employees are getting paid time and a half versus a resident who would be getting paid $7.25 an hour. So it's,
Well, Chief, the better answer is that the 49 employees reflects part-time employees who are only paid when they work a shift.
correct, thank you, Steve.
So it's just a smaller pool of part-time employees that are working shifts. So the spend amount on a per-shift basis remains the same. There's just a smaller pool of people interested in taking the shift, which is the 49, 20,
Well, that's
the
what was
50, 20.
also discussed.
Does that answer
Yeah,
your
that
question?
answered my
We're
question.
losing the inexpensive
The
people.
free and low-cost labor
The
is
free and low-cost labor is the ones that are getting gone, right? So, yeah.
Okay.
That's why it's exponentially more expensive to,
Right, so between the time and a half and then the free and low-cost labor gone, right? Like, there's not that,
Well, the low-cost labor in the intern program, the intern program costs roughly $100,000 a year now to operate at 6 employees.
no, it's, well, it's, to operate it fully, it's up to 180.
180. So it is a cost increase from what it was, but it is not gone.
But we anticipate, Joe, that the people interested in that program are going to decrease over time.
sure.
Just because that simple fact is that they, at the moment, they could come work for us for $7.25 an hour, or they can take that same job, do the same thing, work at a Waukesha or Brookfield for $60,000 starting plus benefits. It's pretty easy to see where they're gonna go.
Yep.
I'm still a little confused, Matt. You just have to work with me. The 970,000 is above and beyond
The CPI too.
the CPI too. And 2 weeks ago when you were here, you mentioned you had a $200,000 budget issue. And we had a long discussion about taking it out of reserves. You never mentioned you had a $970,000 budget issue. You mentioned you had a $200,000 budget issue. So how did we go from this is just 2 weeks ago. How did we go from a $200,000 budget issue to a $978,000 budget issue?
I can tell you that the $200,000 issue was the.
That
no
was your
change-
number.
Yes, no changes in staffing, no changes in taking any steps to change the model that we utilize on a daily basis. the 923 does. It takes that step to hire the 7 individuals to do what we need to do. And it starts to take step 1 of probably 4 steps, to Steve's point. Those steps, the out steps need to be ratified by the board and discussed, and I'm sure that will go through the full vetting process that it's deserved. And I think the other thing, the phase-in program, phase-in period, gives you the opportunity to ebb and flow. So let's say that the job market changes and we have all of a sudden an influx of 60 part-time people or 40 part-time people, and we can continue to utilize that program, by all means, that's what we're gonna do, absolutely. This is just the pure and simple unfortunate facts of it, is that the model to staff fire departments using low and free cost labor is imploding as we speak. We have to take steps to decrease our reliance on that said model and change the way that we staff our agencies.
And I think we have to be clear here that this is not a situation that's unique to Lake Country Fire and Rescue. This is a
Thank you, Ed.
nationwide issue that's affecting our mutual aid partners also very, very much so. I mean, Western Lakes obviously is having the same issues. We can debate how they got there versus how Lake Country Fire and Rescue got there, but at the end of the day, you've got, 20-some communities within Western Waukesha County who are facing severe staffing issues. Stations are being browned out, response times are going up, public safety is being put in danger, and we as elected officials need to figure out a way to help our partners in the fire and EMS service make sure that, when our loved ones and our neighbors call 911, that they respond in adequate times.
I don't think anybody on the board would object to anything you just said. I mean, that's like motherhood and apple pie. The question is, how do we do it?
Well, right, how do we do it, and where do we find the money?
Let's try to focus on how we do it.
Sure, I mean, the 3 ways that were presented, right? We've got exceeding levy limits, which already Chief Fenning said you're not recommending that, right? A referendum is 20 months, right? Which then does nothing for 2023, which then, at least per the presented methods of fixing this, the only thing left that does anything in the immediate term is the fire fee, which has its own problems with it in and of itself, right? So
Well, I think ultimately the question is, how much reserves does Lake Country Fire and Rescue have to have a short-term fix to fix, to fix this issue in 2023 so that we have enough runway to get a referendum? Because I think ultimately it is going to be a referendum, and it's going to be on the taxpayers to, understand this problem, and we're going to have to do road shows and make sure that our constituencies and that our, the taxpayers understand that, hey, there's a problem here, there's a staffing crisis, and we got to figure out how to pay for this and make sure that, we're meeting our, American Heart Association response times and our NFPA response times, because there are, obviously these national standards that, we've got to try to staff to make sure that we're responding to folks. But I think the question is, how much reserves do you have to, obviously there's a short-term fix so that we're not browning out stations, because that, your memo just really, it sounds the alarm bells, because your response times are trending in the wrong direction, and we can't be browning out stations. I mean, that's problematic, especially on weekends.
Absolutely, it absolutely is. The answer to your question about the reserve fund, I know that there's 250 that is set off into this, and there's a number, I don't have the audit in front of me. There are a couple different avenues inside of there. They did take some out of the contingency fund for next year. We could continue to utilize some of that, but it doesn't get you all the way to the 923, I can tell you that. And then I guess the better question would be is then it would come up to if the communities did not want to do a fire fee, which I think right now is the only way you can maybe get there, is then I think the ask would be is what's in the community's reserve funds as well to help fund this.
Chief, if 2023 was always the big problem, then why did you come to us and ask for a referendum first? Because that was always a 20-month lag time where we were going to long-term plan to do this.
Steve, the answer to that question is when we came to the board on July 12th, the first time that we had browned out a fire station was on July 3rd and 4th. And since then, that problem has gotten exponentially worse. We traditionally run hiring processes where we run 4 a year, one a quarter. We've changed that to running 6 a year now. And the first 3 hiring processes that we ran as the organization, we received 0 qualified applicants to fill the part-time positions. So as people.
How many applicants did we receive?
We received 3 of them. And again, 0 were qualified for various reasons, background checks being one of them, and probably one of the, I mean, not for a public meeting, but when you fail the background check, you can't work in our organization. So that's just how it is.
I guess that kind of leads into one of the questions I was going to ask is, like, so one way or another, say you get the thumbs up to do this. I mean, you already kind of answered it. The pool is not really there. If tomorrow you had the money, how long do you think it would take to actually fill the first, what is it, 6 or first 7?
I can say with almost certainty that those positions will be filled in Q1 of next year. We have 5 individuals that are graduating from paramedic class in November of this year. They have to do capstone after they graduate, so you can anticipate that they would be ready for hire. They'd be ready for hire. Sorry, it's going to talk again. No. Ready for hire in that first Q of 2023. And then we, as part of our, the new contract, we have lateral entries that could be a possibility. That's kind of a new thing in the fire service, but again, this is a destination. People want to work here. People want to live here for the same reason that we live and work here. You know, our compensation package we're not the highest paid. We're right at the, you know, median level, maybe a little bit above it, but we're at a place where we're competitive. The culture here is great. The communities support us, and those are the type of things that people look for when they want to come work for us.
I do not like the idea of this body using the month of July to make gigantic funding decisions and changing the way we tax our citizens. That is a 1-month sample size. This fire department is wonderful. You serve our community so well. And the town of Delafield has so much better of service than we did in 2020. Our response times, since we consolidated, went down 40% from 2020 to 2021. Is that right?
That's correct.
They've gone up 28% this year. Our town is still getting better response times. Like there's numbers, they change each year. We're making big decisions as to how we tax citizens. And I'm not super interested in having a crisis mentality when it comes to how we fund and make this decision. That's totally separate from the need. That's totally separate from the reality. That's separate from how the fire service is changing and how we need to adapt. I'm just not going to have us sitting here on September 13th feel like we have to make a decision because of what happened in July. Chief, one of his options is a referendum, and I believe that is an option that we should take a strong look at because it addresses our problem for the long term. And we could fix this thing for the next decade if we got that right. The fire fee is a very, very short-term solution to what is a very, very short-term problem at the moment. I believe Chief when he says that the nature of fire service is changing, but we need to really contemplate how we respond to that change in the way that we do it.
Yeah,
So,
we need a collective stance and go out and sell it. I mean, we could have a referendum in April, but we need to start a roadshow this fall, getting out in front of people. I've talked to residents. They're not happy about the fire fee at all, not at all. You've talked to them. You've talked to Mr. Nowacki.
I had a great meeting with him on Friday.
Yeah?
And I think as I educated him, he came around to the idea. I mean, I
Oh,
don't want to
no.
speak for him, but.
I saw him Saturday. He's not around to the idea.
well,
I
I
think
think
we-
I've talked to Mr. Nowacki, and we'll just use him as an example of a citizen, because it's no different than us on the board.
That's right.
We're all in agreement on where the fire service is going and where it has to go. The real debate that we have to have is how do we tax our citizens? How do we go about raising taxes on our citizens? And what is an equitable way to do that? I think that is the debate.
That's the whole
That
debate.
you're getting to.
Yeah, we don't, I mean, I am personally very opposed to anything that circumvents the levy, or the tax referendum issue. I don't think we should impose a fire fee, because it's just a way to, it's a sneaky way to get around the tax referendum requirement. I think if we want to go with a fire fee, we put it on the April ballot, and we have the voters vote for a fire fee, knowing that knowing that we've educated them and they have that response. If we want to go for a full budget levy increase, we put that on the referendum in April. But we don't do anything. Your numbers, again, the chart you're showing us in the executive summary is still the CPI plus 2, and it's off by over $50,000. So, I mean, you ought to use the right number, because it's CPI plus 2 is 7.5%, I believe, is the correct number. But I don't see increasing taxes on our citizens, and a fee is simply a tax on our citizens. And I'm not even sure we have the time. Dan and I have discussed this at length. I'm not sure we have the time to even get it done.
I mean, I was also on
The more
the,
time we spend having discussions like this and not about the fundamental fix to the problem, the less time we have to implement the change. And that, I mean, I think we got to.
Well, the fundamental fix of the problem is long-term, not a fire fee. It's a long-term levy, and I am discussing that right now. And I'm saying if we want to do a levy referendum in the April election, then we need to start working on that right away. And that is the long-term fix of the problem.
with all due respect, this body has not spent nearly enough time discussing the implications of raising taxes to this degree on its citizens. So that is something we need to spend a lot more time
Yeah.
discussing. Because that is, quite frankly, our charge. The fire board's charge is truly to evaluate the fire service and look at the chief. They are not considering the implications of taxing the citizens in the same way it is our job to do so. It's simply a different role, it's a different body. Those discussions are had at length at the fire board, but those discussions are ours as to how we tax people, so.
I also think that the state code will tell the town that you have to provide fire protection to your constituents, and what's adequate fire protection? That's the question.
What's that mean?
I mean, what's adequate? Is 10 minutes adequate? Is that adequate? Is 20 minutes adequate? I mean, I guess I'm asking, what's the solution for 2023? And is this body acceptable of browning out a fire station half the time?
Matt, based on the webinar we looked at, and Steve and Ron was in for some of it as well, do you feel like the fire fee option, and I asked this last time, do you think it's sustainable? And I only ask this because we still have unanswered questions as far as the calculations and how 2013 budget. I mean, I looked at our 2013 budget. Fire and EMS cost us $733,000 that year. We don't borrow for capital, so we have to include that. So our reduction, $733,000 is more than what your proposed budget is for 2023 at 2% plus CPI, which is a little troubling. And I'm just wondering if we're basing this off of a percentage of fire calls. And I've asked this to you before, and I don't know if we have an answer yet, is what if in 2022 your fire calls are 21%? Then it limits, your phased-in approaches to increase by another 900,000 in 2024. How do you do that when you kind of have to go based off of the fee itself? I just want to make sure that you're setting the fire department up for, if this is the need, if you need to be at $3.8 million in 4 years, is the fire fee really a good option? Only because you're stuck with it, and it's really hard to go backwards. Once we implement it, we lose our, we have to take a levy limit reduction of 2013 cost.
Yeah, for clarity, because you and I were on the phone, which is why I was late, we were doing the math on these numbers. We have to reduce our levy by somewhere close to $500,000, perhaps somewhere south of there, $250,000, to impose the fee. And there's a lot of open questions as to what impact that would have on our general fund and that would look like moving forward should the fee go forward. We also heard on the presentation, Dan, that there's about 2 or 3 towns in the entire state that are doing a fire fee. It's a very new thing, which I didn't realize. I thought that was really interesting. And the town that started it, they used an assessor to assess each house in the town to determine what their fee would be. That there's a process that goes into figuring out how you assess that fee that we haven't even begun to. That would be a part of what you would need to think about as part of a full program of an ordinance when you're talking about a fire fee.
Yeah, and I don't think this is a short-term problem. I think it is a long-term problem, but I think it stems more from a levy limit concern from the state statute standpoint, and just funding in general. And I think the fee, as much as it is a short-term solution, and that's how I'm kind of looking at it, is how do you go back from a short-term solution when you're kind of locked in? Because then how do we increase our levy limit from that
I don't
point?
think we can without a referendum. If we deduct our levy limit to go to a fee, and let's say the fee's temporary 1 year,
Dan, have you seen that worksheet?
I don't think we can increase our
With
levy
the
again without going through a
increases to the-
referendum.
Correct.
On the state DOR worksheet for this, there is now a line item for your 2013 fire budget. And then that's what you have to, it's an in and an out, so it's here's your thing, and then you do it here, and then it comes down on the bottom. So, if you did it, you could do it for next year, and you could change, from my interpretation of it. Then if it's something and then you wanted to do it referendum-based and referendum-wise, you could put it on referendum, and so I guess we could fix 2023 or do what we need to do for 2023 while we work on the long-term solution. That's, I think, the key. And you're able to, it's a line on the worksheet. What did you do for fire in 2020, 2013?
2023.
What's that?
2023.
No, it's a line. So
It's a
you can
deduction.
back
Going
out
back out,
2013.
okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
'Cause 2013 was the year that this law was created.
Gotcha.
You could do it.
So you could do it, but I guess my point is you'd have to do it for 23, and then, your best interest would, I assume, be to do a referendum in
Yeah,
23 too,
Fully committed to that.
so that you don't
Won't
get
that
tied down to a
increase the
fire fee.
levy, the size of the levy referendum, though?
Not-
If we,
Because if you lower it now, you'd have to go up
Now.
higher. Yeah,
by 700,000,
that's an interesting
okay.
point, Ron.
and then you have a fee, and we only want to do it for 23, and in 24, we want to have a referendum to take us above that, we have to add that 700,000 onto the referendum. So instead of having a referendum for 300,000, now we have a referendum for $1 million.
I don't-
You can't, to my knowledge, if we reduce our levy
Yeah.
to increase it again, we have to have a referendum. So we'd have to add it to whatever referendum we wanted to have in April.
To be fair, though, for the conversation, I don't think you're talking about reducing it by 700,000. I think Dan said your total spend that year was 700,000, and that was for fire and EMS.
Okay.
If we base it on a percentage, I'd have to look at the call numbers, but if you're talking about 25%, it'd probably be around 200,000, 188,000, somewhere around there.
It's a fair point, though, that when we go down, we have to go back up.
Gotta go. And I know the people here, if we decide as a board that we could raise our levy through a referendum of $400,000, and we really go out and sell it, we might have a chance at doing that. But now we have to add the other 2 to 250 on top of it that we reduced. Now we're at a $650,000, $700,000 levy. We just lost that 2 years ago.
And the Department of Revenue may have an answer for that too, because as much as people do change things from their levy to a fee, there are conversions to be made from a fee to a levy. It just is another answer
It's an
that we just have
open
to figure
question,
out from the Department of
I mean,
Revenue.
obviously need an answer on, or clarity on that.
I think, Mr. Chairman, you raised a very good point. At the risk of our body saying that we're going to do a fee and then a referendum, we've seen time and time again in the town that the referendums fail. And we would find ourselves in a situation where we now have a fee that is increasing quite a bit year over year. I believe Chief's projections over a 5-year, it becomes a $400, $500 fee by 2025, 2026, which is a very large year-over-year increase that people need to be aware of, that we would be
It's a
signing up
tax.
for. And if a referendum were to fail for us to unwind a fee, we would have no choice but to continue going with the fee in order to just maintain the funding, which is a big risk that we have to weigh when you look at the timing of all this.
I agree.
As far as, because it's easy for us to sit here and say, we'll go to referendum in April, but everybody here is just very aware of what happened with the road referendum, very aware of that it took 20 years, and Ed, how many referendums did it take to get
3.
this? 3 referendums just to get the
This
fire
building.
building. So, I mean, we have to be sensitive to that as we're making the decisions, that,
But if we do a good sales job and we do a good road show and we're out in front of Rotary clubs and in homeowners associations and we sell it hard and say it's only a 350 or 400, we can't do 10 years. They won't pass that. But they might pass a $200,000 to $300,000 levy increase. But if they fail on a $200,000 or $300,000 levy increase and they know that response times won't be 8 minutes, they're going to be 10 minutes or 11 minutes, then that's the message they're telling us, that they're acceptable. They're okay with an 8-minute or 10-minute response time. And I'm not sure it's our role to shove it down their throat that they'll take an 8-minute response time. If the levy limits a reasonable number in the $200,000 to $300,000 range for 2 years or 3 years, and we go back and do another $200,000 or $300,000 levy limit increase. You can't push a 10-year plan by in one referendum. You think it'll pass? 10-year?
No, I don't think it's going to pass. I don't think it's going to pass. I think the taxpayers in the town of Delafield are very critical taxpayers, and they watch it like a hawk, and it's got to be a really good sales job.
Yeah.
But it's not
In a
gonna-
reasonable number.
In a reasonable number. And I think that, you know, we have a problem with our budget that we're looking at right now, this 713 number, because it's not going to solve our problem. But like, what realistically number should be in there to solve our problem?
is your question, Ed,
For
if-
2023.
Yeah, if the 2023 budget includes 7 new FTEs, which is Chief's 900,000 budget, what is the impact to the town? Like, what is the dollar amount for the
Well, yeah,
town?
what is the 20% that we pay to the town?
I can get that for you right now.
23%.
It's my understanding that the 713 doesn't solve the problem. We're still gonna have stations browned out. We're still gonna have response times that aren't trending in the rear.
819, 450, 477.
So he needs another $100,000, basically.
So this is exactly the discussion we should be having.
100,000, take it out of reserves. If you need another $100,000.
No, he's asking us, the town of
Our-
Delafield,
our
for $100,000.
What was it?
819, 464, 77.
So
That's
819.
That's your operations.
819,465.
465. In Chief, that's the operations budget. The cap budget does not have any increase outside of CPI plus
No.
2% under your proposed expansion budget,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, but. and
I'm
Steve,
just needling you when I call expansion instead of needs.
Okay,
and
Dan,
just to be very, sorry, go ahead.
no, well, we can't spend outside of our levy increase. We can't spend
We
outside.
can't
the s-
levy outside of 2% plus CPI.
But we can
within it,
spend.
But we can spend. It would just be eating.
So if the
eating
board
in the general
decides to
fund.
go into our reserves, so 105,000, plus the 35 we're already going in for the
20,000.
20,000, so.
So
it'd be a-
it's 20,000 is the proposed
Is
police.
current.
I don't want to skip ahead to the.
Yeah, but it's, okay, so that would,
So the current budget that we're presented with is, we're already $20,000 in the hole with the 5-day-a-week.
Yes.
yeah. And now, the board could decide to go another $100,000 in the hole to, or 105 to 125,000 and fund your thing for,
Well, not a whole lot of the reserves. I mean, it's there for reserves, right? It's,
oh, I'm very comfortable with
Right,
reserves.
right,
I'm
right.
not comfortable with a fee.
right. I mean, the
We have a massive public safety problem in the
Right.
town, and how do we fund it? Go ahead.
exactly, no, the
I mean,
problem,
it's-
my
it's
concern.
the biggest thing we have to talk all year.
Yeah, my concern is what happens, the degradation of the organization over a 20-month wait, right? Like, what, I'm agreeing with you, right? Like
That's
a
a
fee.
first.
That's not true.
Mark the tape.
I am not.
536,
I am not into. I am not into adding a fee, especially because fees become perpetual, right? Like that's
They
just
always
you
do.
watch that in every slice of government everywhere.
Exactly
right. So
Yes.
that's not that is not something I have a huge desire to add. My concern is the degradation of a 20-month wait of the organization and what happens in that meantime, right? And you know what you don't want to does suddenly by month 18 that's an 18-minute response time, right? Does it just double, right? And that's stuff that we don't have that crystal ball for, but generally speaking, as you're, you know, if you continue to have the bleed of employees you do have, right? And we can't backfill it, that becomes a huge problem. And where is that huge problem? Is it in month 8, or is it month 12, or is it month 20? Like, nobody knows.
But if you're
And-
opposed to a fee,
Oh,
and
no.
we can't do a referendum.
Right, no, I
Then
hate,
do
like,
we-
that's-
then-
I'm voicing the concern of, I don't like a fee. My big concern is waiting, and what do we do, or is there a solution?
We need a
And-
stopgap.
Right, and which if it's the $100,000 difference out of our reserves, that's a whole lot more palatable. What happens in the rest of the community organizations that have to, we go, hey, here's our stuff, and great, but
Well, I think that's a
everybody
s-
else has got to,
Yeah, I think that's a
Figure out where?
$64 million question is, okay, the town of Delafield, we provide 20% to the funding LCFR according to the formula. What is the temperature of the other communities around LCFR to figure out how to make this work for 2023 before we can all go to referendum or before we can figure out the fee, you know, or is it going to come down to the Delafields? I mean, I think that's what the question is.
I very much hesitate to speak for other municipalities.
I'll do
Well,
it.
but I
I'll
think
do
that
it.
the
It comes
elected
down to the
officials may
Delafields
need
end.
to
It comes
speak
down
to,
to the
It comes down to the
The
Delafields.
city and the town.
Yes.
I mean, why would North Lake oppose? They pay, what, 5%?
Well, I mean, North Lake isn't it, but the Village of Oconomowoc Lake, they already exceed the levy
Right.
limit. So they don't, you know, there's no.
and do we, I mean,
Schuylkill exceeds the levy limit,
Yeah.
so they don't have the same restrictions that we're working in.
And Steve, just to clarify, Shaniqua does not.
Shaniqua does
Oconomowoc
not.
Lake does. But I think when you look at it, I think the argument proportionately is that when you look at levy, you know, and I don't wanna get into fundamental thing, but Ed, just to answer your question, the temperature that I receive is that the concept, the need is supported by the majority of the municipalities. I met with the city of Delafield last night, and gave this same presentation to them last night. From the common council people that were in the room, there was not one of them that spoke in opposition of the need. And it's just coming up with the way to fund it. I know that, you know, long-term wise, and just like everyone's saying in the room, long-term wise, this needs to have a vote from the people. And, you know, I'm just really focused on trying to get us into and through next year, where we remain that agency that maybe not even what we did last year. That may not even be achievable, but something that, to Joe's point, that we don't start having those 18, 20-minute responses, because that's gonna be bad.
I mean, our accountant, and Ed, you know this, we've done an incredible job managing the finances of this town. Our reserves are the highest of any municipality I'm aware of in terms of percentage. But we can afford the $105,000 out of, now Dan doesn't like this idea.
I've asked Dan this
I
like
have
8
some
times
ideas.
and he always refuses to answer me because he doesn't want to answer it.
We can afford the
That's legit, and you know it.
we can afford the $125,000 out of our reserves. But
in the
keep
short term.
What?
In the short
In the
term.
short term.
Right.
But keep in mind, if we go to referendum in April, and that referendum fails, then we're gonna look at a '23 budget that if we vote against the chief coming in a year from now with a budget that's even higher, and we vote, it doesn't pass, then we're stuck with the '23 budget.
And we've
going
got a
forward.
hole to fill again.
Right.
We got another hole to fill.
Right. And that 2% plus CPI would only pertain to the 2% plus CPI from the previous year. It won't pertain to that 125 that we
Won't
filled.
pertain to, well, the 104, the
Or the
sheriff's
104,
salary.
yeah.
The 105, say it's 105.
Yeah, it's
So-
to the levy number, not our expenditure.
Yeah.
Right.
I just want everybody to be clear. I'm
It's
not opposed-
a bad
I mean, it's a bad idea,
It's a-
but we have a bad situation.
It's the best bad idea on the table.
There you go.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I mean,
I'll accept that.
I mean, because a failed referendum puts us in a really bad hole.
It's in a real tough spot.
It's on the size of the referendum. The smaller the referendum can be, the
But you have a basis for an argument that you had a budget that was a deficit budget because of the lack of funds provided by the levy limit. So you have a basis.
Just, as I forecast this out in the future, what's your opinion on if we do this phase-in plan, but we do a phased-in set of referendums where we're open and transparent with everyone, that if we did one next year, that you could anticipate another one in '25?
I think you have to.
It's the only way I'll support
Only way
it.
to do Matt.
It's the
They'll
only
never
way.
vote for a 10-year increase.
Right.
They'll only vote for
Yes.
2 years.
But you gotta be transparent with everybody up front, saying, you know, we're gonna bite off a little chunk at a time instead of trying to go for all 10 years. And that everybody is aware of that when people do the road shows.
And we're gonna pray that we get more construction in certain places and that our budget and our levy goes up.
Continue to work with our friends in Madison to help us with these levy limit issues
They
too.
have to fix this problem.
at one point you had mentioned, I think in the last presentation, that there was some potential of adjustments in state funding. Is that correct, or?
I know, I can speak for what I know from the Towns Association. So I know that the Towns Association is actually lobbying the state legislature, because to Dan's points, here's some of this kind of the back and forth that's going on, is the Towns Association is lobbying the legislature to, the muddy water right now is in the fire fee. It does nothing, explains nothing about EMS. So how do you handle something that is really a large portion of what we do, and how do we fund that? Now, the argument could be is that every time the ambulance goes out and the patient is transported to the hospital, there's a fee associated with that. We bill and we collect that fee, and that fee covers our supplies, it covers our mileage, it covers staff time and things like that. So some of that is self-supported by those types of fees. But the Towns Association is pushing to move the ambulance fee to allow you to do the ambulance fee as well. And that's something that,
That's just another fee, though.
correct.
Yeah.
Which, I mean,
But they're not, there's no negotiations or lobbying to, like.
I mean, the
different
Towns Association
contribution
tries to
limits.
get the levy
Sure,
limit raised
they try to
every
get
year.
it. But I mean, but there's not a statewide push anywhere in the, like additional funding or change in funding to
There is
be able
that-
to add to it.
There is that too. There is a push, and I don't know, we only know what we hear from our sources at, like, the Towns
Sure.
Association, the LWMMI, but they are pushing, the state. So Wisconsin is one of very few states, I don't know the exact number, but it's a very small percentage of states that fire and EMS and law enforcement too, because we have to talk about law enforcement. I mean, they're in the same pinch that we are. If you follow some stuff that's going on in the sheriff's department right now,
Sure.
I don't want to speak for them. They're having the same staffing problem. They have full-time positions, right? Wisconsin is one of very few states that does not send, what I'll say, state aid directed towards public safety. Either that's in the way of a sales tax, or that's in the way of, additional state aid off of income tax and things like that. So there is some push to do some sorts of things like that. There's already a structure in place that we utilize for CPI, or not CPI, our 2% dues that we receive from, but those are just a pass-through. The state charges the homeowner's insurance, the insurance company. I'm sure you're well aware of that. That's just a pass-through that we all pay in our homeowner's insurance. So there are some things in place in regards to that. So sorry for going off on a tangent.
No, I guess what the ultimate goal in that is, especially if you can have a palatable referendum that is a 2 or 3 year plug, and there's legislation that changes statewide, right, eventually, or what have you. I mean, all that really matters is we've got the flexibility, and we can have a small enough referendum that people will be comfortable with it.
And is there, perhaps we can talk about this later on, but is it a total police and fire referendum? Just for food for thought. I mean, we have both of these problems, and both of them are going to go, potentially going to go into our reserves.
I'd keep it just fire in this
Okay.
case.
I want to be,
Just my opinion.
yeah.
I'd focus on the fire.
It's the gigantic problem the town has, is how do we fund public safety
Public
moving
safety
forward?
is a huge issue in town.
I want to be very clear, though, as this discussion moves on and heads in a specific direction, that I do not want the town, I'll speak for myself, the town funding 7 new positions in 2023, for me, does not represent an endorsement of this 3 to 4 year plan that has you hiring 30 people. I am willing to take an action to improve the fire service for 2023, but I don't want at any point the town to think that we agreed to an entire plan. I think everything we saw from consolidation through COVID, I think the fire service is truly a 2 to 3 year horizon. It seems to change quicker than any other industry that I can see. And we have to take this year by year and see where we're at. So I just don't want us next year to be listening to a presentation that said, this was our plan, this is what you agreed to for 2024. I want us to be cognizant that this is a 1 year thing, and we have to evaluate totally anew next year. That's where I stand on 2023 and the out years. So.
Well, that's a good point.
Start next year in January and not in July also.
Oh, yeah. Coming this late is not good.
Tell you, if Mrs. Fennig will demand that we start in January, because this has been all consuming.
How did you come up with the 104,000?
How did I?
Yeah.
So you have this, I'm sorry, you have the other spreadsheet in your hand?
I have, our
Your
budget.
total ops contribution with the 7 positions is 819,464.77.
819. What's this 923, 234?
That was his whole thing.
That's the total increase to the fire department budget.
Not our portion.
I believe he's saying the 120,000, is that the number?
104.
104,000 is our contribution to that?
What's your contribution on the spreadsheet you have right there, Steve?
The total is 23%. So the 65% formula shows us at 20.5%. And then the remainder is a dollar figure. It's not a percentage, but.
But what's the base you're using for 104, or use 800 and what?
819,464.77.
819.
Is that correct, Dan? 819?
Let's see. What are you showing?
That's still.
That would be next year's budget, our contribution portion plus, or with the added 104,000,
Yeah,
right? So we were
we're
looking
at-
at that 713,906.59.
Oh, so I see.
And then basically what they're saying is, hey, we need to plug the 105,000, we're
Okay, so that's
They're looking
less
for- from town of
capital
Delafield,
plus
the
the
105,000.
200,000 out of that 800. Okay.
approximately 105.
But if you add capital though, then what's our total?
922,404.
Yes,
That's the number we
105,000.
need.
922,044.
Like I said, I think it's the best of the worst decisions.
All right. So then, yeah, that changes a little bit.
It's a little over 105,000.
What were you just saying about adding capital?
No, it would have to, the number wouldn't be 819, it'd be 922,04437. That was less capital. So it was just operating.
Oh, so the operation goes up almost $200,000.
Yeah, because we fund everything through our operating budget, not through capital.
Yeah, you're almost 200.
Yeah.
So it's not 104,000.
200,000.
It'd be about 207,000.
Different story.
So the base is now 923, no, what I thought, 923?
So, what about, we run into the same problem if we fund with our general fund if a referendum doesn't pass, because then they hire 7 new people, and then we say, well, we can't support your positions the following year. I mean, if we have confidence.
Correct. It is a bad decision that has bad long-term implications should a referendum fail, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
The other thought is, can we stagger in those hirings? I mean, let's say a referendum did pass, great, but can we reduce that number of 900,000 to something a little less if we hire throughout the year instead of hiring all of them at once?
Or instead of hiring 7, say we hired 4. We'd still be better off than we are now. I don't think we can do 200,000 in reserves. 'Cause that means we'd have to go to a referendum, a minimum of 400,000 just to cover 23 and 24. Just simple curiosity, why do you call them brownouts, when brownouts are usually related to, or associated with electrical failures?
It's just a term that's used in the fire station because we're not closing the station permanently, we're just taking it off of line.
Okay.
I mean, I think there's also maybe a case to make in here where we could dip a little more into, you know, to show skin in the game, is we could take more out of our contingency fund as well. But I don't wanna speak for the other 13 members of our board, so.
Well, there are, I mean, there's close to $600,000 in reserve, is that correct?
I don't wanna quote that number, I'm sorry. But you're in the ballpark, correct?
Well, see, if you took 400,000 out and we get 20% of that advantage, then we get $80,000. So it takes the 200 down to 120,
Makes it a little bit more palatable.
which is a lot more doable than the 200. 200 can't get done. Now, I'm looking for a way to do this,
Absolutely,
so.
I appreciate
Well, and
it.
at the end of the day, I think it's gotta be a partnership. I think the fire board and the municipalities need to figure out how to get us through 2023 so that we have that 20-month runway to get this referendum, out there in the road show and get it sold. Because ultimately, the only way that we can do this, given the state laws, is a referendum. Because it sounds like there's too many strings. I mean, the fire fees doesn't sound like it's necessarily the best option either.
And just for full transparency, I think you could do the referendum if that's the route that this body wants to go. There are other communities that I think.
I don't care what they do. They want to do fire fees, let them do it. I'm not open for a fire fee.
Well, but if they do a fire fee and we don't, then you have a phased-in approach where you want to increase the fire fee a certain amount, but we aren't going to be tied to that. We'll be tied to something different.
We
so
are
we'd have
not tied to
figure
that.
it.
I
So-
mean, this municipality has full authority each year to approve the budget.
Yeah.
Like, we get to approve it, and
Then we fund it.
that is our choice. So our fate is not tied to anybody else's as to how we fund this. We want to be good partners and do right with everybody else, but,
So if we say, this is a big if, that we're open to going into reserves to $120,000, and that would mean that we're open to a budget of, just for the fire department, not for the police,
Correct.
$833,907,000 would be our share of your budget.
Could you just say that again for me?
833,907. That's 120,000 over the 713,907. I rounded up. And that means we'll have a $120,000 deficit spending for fire department. That means our referendum technically should be 240 to cover us for 2 years.
Yeah, so the referendum, and I guess this goes down to, and this probably, take it back to the board level, the discussions in January, and probably even before that, November, December, as hard as it is to get meetings set, but when you do that referendum, do you want to, agree on what year 1 and 2 look like, and is that what you're doing the referendum for, is year 1 and 2?
We're doing a 200, and again, this is all.
we're thinking out
I'm throwing
loud.
a lot of
No,
cards.
Yes, we're thinking out loud,
Yeah,
yes.
$240,000 in an April 2023 referendum to support the fire department for a 2 to 3 year period. Because if we can get, say it approves, that means in 2024, January 24, we get $240,000 more. We take 120 of it, we put it back into our reserves, so we just are even for 2023, because we
Yeah.
built our reserve back up.
Yes.
We have 120,000 for '24 that's already paid for from the referendum. Then in '25, we can take out the 120,000 that we put back and spend for '25, and then in '26, go for another referendum. Or '25 or '26.
For 26.
Go, yeah, '26 go for, 25 go for referendum, 26 and '27. We're taking money from our right pocket, putting it in the left pocket, and then giving it all to the fire department. But it's kind of a,
Yeah, but at the end of the day, we can't look out farther than 3 years tops, really, because
Yeah,
of
we
how
can't.
fast things are changing.
we
Would you
can't.
do that referendum as an ongoing referendum?
No, I don't think you can legally do ongoing referendums. You can say to the people, we're coming now for 240. If things don't change, in 2 to 3 years, we're gonna have to come back to you for another 240.
I think Kettle Moraine did an ongoing
I think you can
referendum.
do ongoings.
You can do one raise for 1 year, and then the next
That's
year
true.
different, and then.
No, I think that
continuing.
decreases the likelihood of getting it
Because the
passed.
I
question's gonna be
agree.
too
You immediately
convoluted.
check no on the
It
word
will
ongoing.
convolute it, and then when you do that language, the problem is, well, either way, I mean, if you do a referendum for, let's say, $400,000, you have to put in the language, it's an ongoing referendum, because it is an ongoing referendum, and that the next year, you're not gonna go back.
It's not a
And we had
one-time
that-
capital
Right,
expense,
and we
right?
had to, and
It's
we
an
had to
operating
put that in
expense.
ours when we made our referendum language, so either way, it's gonna say that. The difference is, a continuous referendum for, let's say, 3 years is $1 amount, increase to another, and then that dollar amount moving forward.
Yeah, I don't think that'll pass.
And that language is convoluted, and it doesn't look pretty.
Uses people.
Yeah, although
Real
Kettle
simple,
Moraine
you tell
voted yes
people-
for it, but.
You tell Dick Nowacki's and people, we need $240,000 for the fire department.
Moving forward.
And that'll take us for 2, maybe 3 years, but it'll cover us for 2 years, and then we'll have the discussion again. And I think we could do that and still be fiscally responsible to our budget and to the residents of the town. And extremely generous in my Irish heart to the fire department.
Yeah, I mean, and then it's, hey, listen, we've got skin in the game then to sell this thing,
Yeah, but
because,
sort of see, he's
I
got
will.
$400,000 coming out of his reserves.
yes, and I would strongly recommend that the chief, when he's, well, we can talk about that another time, but we need to ask for a set amount of money for a set amount of time. We cannot balloon ourselves to 4 million to solve a decade's worth of problems. We have to make it really digestible for the people to understand what we need to operate now. We've seen in communities around us, they got tripped up trying to do that, and it's incumbent upon us to not do it that way and say, this is what we need, and that's what we need, so.
And again, I think that's, I don't think a fire fee was, from my perspective, is fair or responsible, so, for me. But if the other municipalities want to do it, their costs are so much lower than ours.
The direction of using reserves to go to referendum and then replenishing reserves and fighting the fire department is much more responsible to the taxpayer
No, I agree.
than going to voting us voting on a fee on November 15th that shows up on their bill
January 1.
January 1, and us hoping that they're not going to notice it.
It's a rolling, giving up our reserves, going, spending for 2 years, going back to referendum, refunding our reserves, spending for 2 years. It's
No, I think that, I mean,
the concept.
if, right, as you say, if the stars align, this is a good, I think it sounds like a reasonable solution, because again, my biggest problem is taking 20 months to solve a problem, right? That is almost as unpalatable as a new tax line item.
I'd say it's more.
But that 20 months I think that's a concern, and I think we have potentially a reasonable solution to it, you know?
So our 120,000, that would, if that's our portion, obviously you'd probably equal out with the rest, so that'd be a $522,000 total increase to the budget for next year. So I don't know where that leaves you, but.
We've been talking about a 120,000 number that quite frankly, we kind of made up.
Oh, I just whipped it out.
Yeah, we made it up. So there's some practical implications of us making up a number as to how we
figure that out, just so everybody's aware, right?
Right.
The fire, the steps for the LCFR Fire Board to do this is going to require an IMA amendment, which is a separate issue for another night. But we would have to go back to all of the communities and say, here's the number, I guess, that we're willing to
We
fund.
being the fire board,
I guess yes, we would have to go back.
not the town.
The town, well, the town is,
No, the town goes to him and we'll say, we'll pay $120,000 over this 713. We'll pay 833,907, period. That's 20%. That's what we'll pay you. And then you go figure out a budget to keep our share at 833,907. And then
Yes.
he has to redo a budget. You guys get to vote on it. And then he goes out to all the municipalities and they accept it and fund it however they want.
And meanwhile, we get to propose a referendum.
Oh, we start working on a referendum tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
we can't.
and maybe the town of or the city of Delafield will reject this in whole cloth, and
And then they're the
then that's
bad
where
guy.
we're at. Then we need to pass a CPI plus 2%, which they're well within their right to do.
It's one of the few times I'm actually trying to work with you, actually.
We're nothing but
I'm impressed. I'm amazed.
yeah, 6 o'clock.
I was just saying, hold on a second, we're not gonna mark the tape on this one.
Well, it's a very complicated issue.
Right.
We don't have any really good decisions or choices, so we picked the best we can.
The best of the worst.
Yeah, best of the worst. It's not the first time I've done it, so.
Yeah, and if we go, yeah, I guess I want to make a funding decision. I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, that a referendum, we really look at a 2-year to 3-year horizon for ourselves. I think that's an appropriate amount of time.
Yeah.
And I think it gives us time to properly evaluate what having 7 new hires really looks like to our service levels, and we get to see what happens at the state level with levy limits, et cetera. So-
I'm not sure he's gonna get 7 new hires on a 500, what did you calculate it to be, 500 and, well, I don't know what it is. So if you get the whole 900. and get
5
se-
plus the 4 they're kicking. in.
520,
5 plus the 4 you're
522.
kicking in is 700, then it's 900, yeah, you get your 7 new hires. Okay. I don't think there's anything for us to act on tonight.
No, there's nothing for, it's just a good discussion to, I mean, it's a tough problem. It's a
Can't tell you how
difficult
much I
problem.
appreciate the healthy discussion.
Sure. I think everybody has the same, shares the same issues. I mean, if you respond to my neighbor and it's 12, 14 minutes, that's fine. But you better be at my house in under 8.
I don't know if.
There's a different light that comes on when you call.
It's a DND, it's blocked. It's been blocked for years.
Put it in reverse.
Order a pizza. Okay,
Excellent.
thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep working with Dan.
Hang around for anything else, or?
I don't think so.
No.
Are we gonna discuss anything else on our budget?
No, I think the next meeting date we have is the 27th. I think we can go over some more of the operational pieces. I'm gonna have Don here in case there's any questions on his budget. And then the,
Just give an overview of where we're at. I mean, we're now,
Yeah, I mean-
negative 140.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
think
let me-
anything he has in his presentation is applicable, but.
let me plug that in real quick.
Well, yeah, it's just.
I'm teasing.
We're 140 and look at your reserves and take 140 out of it.
But at the end of the day, we're still in good shape and we're,
Oh, yeah. Howard thinks we're
Yeah.
beauty. Yeah.
So we're doing 823.
While he's pulling it up, I'll say it makes good sense for LCFR to spend down some of their reserves. I don't think they're an organization that needs reserves. They rely on us for funding. It would be a bad situation if they had to came back to us in the middle of the year, but they do not need a large war chest. I believe $200,000 are unassigned and $200,000 are assigned funds. The board does have the ability to change those. They were assigned 5 or 6 years ago as community paybacks to the original 3 communities, the city of Delafield, Shaniqua, and Neshota. So that is part of the money that's there.
Because we wouldn't let them distribute it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. There, there were multiple pots of money that were put there over multiple years.
Yeah.
So when we talk about it, it's kind of a phased approach, but.
So based on the increase we proposed, we're at 142,690 in the red.
In the red.
Yeah.
And under your expert management, you're gonna reduce that by,
It'll be at 0 by the end of next year. Yeah. This is 5-day-a-week police service for those who might not know. Right now we're at 2, so we're proposing a very substantial increase to our police department budget. And that's why we were 20,000 in the red, so. Based on the Waukesha County's concerns with their just typical patrols in the area, and with increased issues within certain roads that we have, we think that 5-day-a-week is pertinent, or at least I think that's up to the board to decide, but.
we have major, traffic issues and speeding. It's a huge safety.
No,
concern.
there's a speeding issue, but I think on top of that, there's, the recent articles in the Freeman the last couple of weeks about the cutback of the statutory coverage from the sheriff's department too, that is very troubling and concerning. So, not only do we have LCFR saying they're browning out stations, but the lack of statutory coverage of the sheriff's department in the town of Delafield is also very concerning.
We couldn't get them to cover Highway C before. You think
Right.
we're gonna get them to cover it now?
No,
And so you guys are aware, it's our job to look at an entire town across multiple services. When you
Yes.
hear things about the fire board approving or recommending things to you, they are myopic. They have one focus.
Fire board.
I mean, there's very few actually elected leaders on the fire board now. Most of them are retired fire chiefs. All they want is more money for the fire service. We have to care about police service as well, so.
And the thought process for this is we go in the hole a couple of years by, 20,000 here, 20,000 there. We still have a 34% fund, fund balance, which most communities have a 20 to 25% goal that they want to stay within. So we're being at 34% still very healthy. And if you look at where we were at the end of 2020, at 142,000 in the hole, we still end the year better than we did at the end of 2020. And that percentage is based on your expenditure, or your, I believe it's the revenue, or total revenue over your total fund balance. So we're still in good shape, but I think we may want to find ways to replenish those funds.
If we don't
in
get the
some degree.
development of some form and get our taxes up somehow, then I don't think in
It's not
3 years
sustainable.
we'll have 5-day-a-week sheriff patrol.
Yeah, and
Go back to 3
and we'll go back to 3, or we can do a referendum ourselves for police service.
in there.
And it wouldn't amount to much. It would amount to about $100,000 total.
Dan, we're at 34% now, based off of some of the projection here. Would we be going to 30% next year?
No, this is with the projection. This is next year's budget.
And that includes fire
That
department?
includes that 142,000.
Adjustment, yeah.
You got it.
What was that, 38 or 36? There you go.
This is
36, okay.
36, we go down to 34,
Thank you.
so,
Yeah.
so the year after would be probably 32.
well, not if we fund,
Not if we
we're
get the
not gonna
referendum
fund the
for
fire
fire.
department.
Get the
yeah.
referendum, we'll go back
Okay.
up to 36, 37.
Yeah,
But I think, in my experience, this is a good, effective use of reserves. This is what the reserves are there for.
I think that's right, Mr. Chairman.
And it's not, we're not taking it out forever, we're hoping to put it back in 18 months.
No, like I said, I think it's a far better option than the others without still losing, or at least stemming the
Yeah.
decrease within the.
But boy,
Fire
we
department
all,
organization.
all 5 of us, including Dan, 6 of us, have to work this referendum hard. We really have to go out to Rotary clubs and homeowners associations, God, I'll call Kelly Smith, we'll go that low. So
You really
we
believe
have-
in this, yeah?
We have to work this referendum.
well, if you can get Dick Nowacki on board, then we should be fine.
The referendum is very important for our voters to weigh in. With all due respect to the fire service, they would eat up our reserve as quickly as they could.
Oh, yeah. It's still not have everything
Under
you
the terms
wanted.
of a need-based budget, and still not have everything they want, so, yeah.
Let me say for the record, I'm not sold on going into our reserves for operating, but
Oh, that surprises me.
I wasn't for the
Well,
police
that's-
service either.
I know you weren't. Oh, any other?
That's nice of you. You don't even have to vote
questions,
on it.
Right.
If not, the next workshop meeting is Tuesday, September 27th at 5 PM. And now I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
We'll take a 3.5 minute break for Mr. Green to do his thing.
Thank you.